CEO of Steinbridge, Tawan Davis, and CEO of Feeding America, Claire Babineaux-Fontenot.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're excited to have this conversation today, so I am going to jump right in. My name is Cashauna Hill. I am Executive Director of the Redress Movement, a national nonprofit that works to address segregation at the local level in communities all across the country. So I'm honored to be here today and joined by these esteemed guests. Acting Secretary Todman, I'm going to start with you, please. So congratulations.
Thank you.
On being named acting secretary for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which has been working to address housing insecurity for decades. So I'd like to start with a bit of a two-part question for you. As you undertake this new role, can you share with us what you believe most Americans misunderstand about HUD's work and this country's housing shortage? And in introducing HUD's work to us, can you share what the most significant issue is affecting Black people in America today relative to housing insecurity?
No, thank you, and greetings to my panelists. Wonderful to be up here with you. So many people, when they think about HUD, they think about the housing we provide to some of our lowest income families in the country, our public housing, our Section 8 vouchers. Many people may not be aware of all the work we do to help first-time homeowners. And I know that there's some first-time homeowners out there who need HUD's assistance. You might not know that we're also there to help disaster recovery after there's been a hurricane or a tornado or flooding. That HUD are the ones that help to re-knit the community. Folks may not be aware that there may be a child care unit or even a health clinic that HUD funds are actually supporting because it shows up at the local level, but you don't know it's your federal dollars at work. So we are there holding it down for communities, especially Black communities, all the time. You asked the question, what is one of the biggest issues facing Black America right now in housing? Well, one, we want to make sure that people can afford their rents. And this administration has been laser focused, the president, the vice president, laser focused in making sure that we're working with owners and providing rental assistance to families. In addition to that, we're trying to build new housing to begin with, to make sure that we're trying to drive down some of those costs. But one of the most significant things happening right now in the Black population is the huge gap between how many white folks own their homes and how many of us own our homes. And that's creating a generational wealth issue. So one of the things that HUD has been working on is making sure we are teaching, educating, but providing tools like down payment assistance to families who need our help to buy their first home. The Black-white homeownership gap is creating a wealth transfer gap as we're seeing some of the boomers retiring and even passing on and transitioning, and their equity is going to the next generation. So many of our grandparents and parents might not have that equity to move forward. So we are doing everything we can to make sure we are, closing that gap and making sure that more Black folks can become homeowners.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Mr. Davis, moving on to you. You're in the private sector and have developed a business model to work with nonprofits, Black churches, and historically Black colleges and universities to maximize the value of their real estate holdings. Why is this work important? And can you share a little bit with us about the value that it provides to those you're seeking to serve?
Sure, I appreciate the question, and thank you for being here as well. Yes, we have about today active development in different stages of about $700 million around the country, growing to about $1.3 billion. We should be in construction in about 5 states over the next 12 months, developing homes for rent and for sale for all kinds of American people. My deep conviction is that the opportunity is, I have what I call the latent asset theory, which is that the opportunity exists for us to catalyze underutilized assets to economically productive uses. And if you think about where our assets are, there are really two large asset holders in the African American community. There's the church, and there's the historically black college. So if you think about, there are 350,000 churches in the United States. There are 139 African American congregations. So we represent 12% of the population, but almost 40% of churches. We are 3 times as represented in the church house as we are in the ballot box. And so a lot of our resources, a lot of our land holdings, a lot of our wealth is in the church. And so one of the opportunities is to catalyze those churches' real estate to economically productive uses, particularly as church attendance changes post-COVID. Second opportunity for us is in the historically black college. There are somewhere between 105 and 107, depending on which ones you count and don't count. Of those 105, they employ 134,000 people. They are some of the largest landowners in the African American community. And so the second opportunity for us is to really work with those institutions to catalyze land that now, as the nation moves back to the South, where 90% of historically black colleges are, and remigrates back to the urban center of the South, that's exactly where the land is, that's exactly where our colleges are. And for the last 80 years, people told us that land wasn't valuable. Sure. And now all of a sudden they're trying to move in like the plague. And so the opportunity for us, so we've committed $100 million just to catalyze real estate in historically black colleges.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Ms. Babineaux-Fontenot, another two-part question for you as well. So we know that inflation is a huge issue across the country. It is exacerbating food insecurity across the United States, in addition to causing a variety of other hardships. Can you share with us some of the solutions Feeding America is advancing to tackle the challenge of food insecurity? And can you tell us the ways in which Feeding America centers racial equity in the work to combat food insecurity?
Absolutely. So thank you. And thank you to each of you for the work that you do. I would start by saying that as a theory, I believe it's easy to prove out that the way that we've approached philanthropy in this country is exactly backwards. We've assumed that moneyed interests have the best ideas as well as the money. We've gone into communities and said, in order to get this money, you have to do these things. Feeding America has witnessed and been privileged to participate in transformational change inside of communities when we flip that, and when we've had a strong bias toward going into communities as partners and asking communities for what their own solutions are. And that has unearthed some fabulous opportunities. So we have work that we're doing with black churches. We have work that we're doing around housing. We have work that we're doing with black farmers, growers, and producers. We're participating in processes that are designed to create new ecosystems that are sustainable for communities. We don't think of these as being our tables, but instead we ask for an invitation to someone else's. And we go into communities in the spirit of partnership, trying to think through, how might I be of best service to the interests that you have? How might we be fuel for the solutions you've already thought about and that we can help solve for together? And every time we've done it in that way, we've seen remarkable return. So it's fundamentally important that we, and this kind of touches on your second point as well, but it's fundamentally important that we as a nation contemplate the fact that I don't believe our issue is that we don't have enough people who care about these issues.
Sure.
I believe we do have an issue around how many of us are partnering with each other in those solutions. And when I come to the final point I'd like to make in response to your question is we are the cavalry. The Black community is a rich community filled with resiliency and assets. Thank you for helping to optimize the assets that exist. And certainly we are also confronted by barriers, and most of those barriers are human-made barriers. But I believe and I see in the work that I get to do that when we have a mindset that says we will control the things that we can control, we're going to come up with our solutions, and we're going to go try to find partners who are invested in our solutions. That's when we can all win.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that excellent answer. So, Mr. Davis, I'm going to come back to you and teasing out that thread a little bit around where assets are held, right, in our communities. And given the work that you are doing to maximize assets and really ensure that Black communities are thriving, I wanted to ask, what is a common misperception, or maybe the most common misperception, about the private real estate market and real estate developers in the Black community that you encounter? And how does your work interact with those perceptions?
Sure. Let's see if I can answer that. I tend to see things in context, and I love what you said. My favorite sermon, one of my favorite sermons, is by Adam Clayton Powell, 1967, What's in Your Hand? So we have been so dependent on other people managing our economic outcomes, and they have managed us into multiple generations of poverty. Right? When the French declared so the American Revolution ended with the Constitution being written in about 1788. And America did all it could to maintain slavery. The next year, the French Revolution began in 1789. And by the end of the French Revolution, they had actually abolished slavery. So the American government, with all due respect, has never had a primary interest in the economic well-being of African American people. It has never prioritized the economic outcomes of African American people.
You know I'm going to respond to that.
Yeah. And so my view is that we have to be self-determining. We have to identify, and this goes back to why I, as an African American person, who is the son of a preacher and the grandson of a preacher, view that as an opportunity, not just a pulpiteering opportunity or a preaching opportunity, but an economic empowerment opportunity. And so for me, I am deeply convinced that we have to take our own economic future into our collective hands. And I worked for the government. I worked for Mayor Bloomberg. I worked for public-private partnerships. I helped the city to rehabilitate and rebuild Harlem and Brooklyn and the other parts of the New York City. So I understand and believe in the partnership with government. But we cannot leave it to government to determine our economic outcomes. We have to do that collectively, and we have to find our own resources and our own backyards to do it together. That's my conviction.
Thank you. Please, Acting Secretary.
No. I want to absolutely agree that government can't do it alone. Nonprofits can't do it alone. And as Black folk, we do need to take even more responsibility to make sure that we are helping each other grow and thrive. But I'll tell you what government can do. Leadership matters. Leadership matters at every level. And day one, President Biden did an executive order that said to all of us, we're going to center racial equity in the work that we do. Day one. And that has had a domino effect with everything we've done. And at HUD, we can't talk about racial equity without talking about economic equity, to your point. So when I talked about home ownership, come to HUD, go to HUD.gov, figure out how to become a homeowner. When we talk about the goal that the president and vice president have to make sure that our government contracts are going to Black and brown businesses. When we talk about making sure that we are helping Black developers figure out not just how to build affordable housing, but how to actually have economic growth as a Black development community to make sure we are growing and thriving in a number of different ways. So I completely agree. I'm there with you. Government is not the only answer. But if you don't have the right leadership, then the resources are not available to you the way that it would be with someone who just didn't care.
Absolutely. And if I might, in fact, engage on that same subject, while I hear what you're saying, and I believe that so many people believe it to be true, that somehow one human can gain at the cost of another, it is, in fact, a fallacy. We are our brother's keepers.
That's right.
Our society is better for all of us when all of us have opportunity. When I think about the work that Feeding America does, and that was part of a question that you asked earlier, I go into communities all across the country, red states, blue states, purple states. I've been to all 50 states and Puerto Rico. And in each of those places, what I talk to people about is the fact that at the core of what we do is equity. So I will usually ask people, where you're from, what's the fanciest neighborhood in your community? And they'll tell me the name, and each of you can think about what that would be. And here somebody might say in New Orleans East, it's Eastover, whatever you say. Then I ask people, so how many food distributions are you doing over there? And they go, no, I don't think you understand. We don't do food distributions over there. That's where the rich people are. And I say, is it because you hate the rich people? And they're like, no. I said, well, why don't you do it? Because they don't need the food. So when we fundamentally understand that we all have an interest in equity, that equity, the work, the space of equity elevates every single one of us, then we are opportunistic, I find, as humans. We tend to attach to the things that we can see. Well, what's that going to do for me? That is something, and sometimes the for me is altruistic, but still, how's that going to help advance something that I care about? The work that we're talking about advances what everybody actually cares about. And that's a myth that I'd love to be a part of dispelling.
You know, I love this conversation because, you know, I am commercial, right? I believe in that. And I believe that the primary consistent theme in the Constitution is actually property rights. So there's one thought, and that is today, 30 of the 50 states have either passed or are in process of passing anti-DEI and anti-equity legislation. So the question is, 40% of African American people live in those states. We cannot leave those 40 million people, 40% of our folks, destitute. So we have to figure out how to be successful economically where they like us and where they don't.
And
I guess that's my point, is that we've got to be
Self-reliant.
We've got to be self-reliant in all political cycles, whether it's political leaders that we prefer or political environment that may be somewhat adverse to our circumstances.
Thank you so
100%.
much for that. And as we wrap up,
Wrapping up? Wait, we're just getting started.
I know, and I could absolutely sit here all day, but I do not believe they want us to do that. And so we want to respect everyone's time and wrap up with some final thoughts. And so I would love to give you all the chance to share what it is that individuals can be doing in their communities around these very critical issues related to housing insecurity and food insecurity.
I would say stay informed. One of the things that concerns me is we do all these things in Washington, D.C., but the information is not getting to the folks who need it the most. So I really encourage you to go to HUD.gov. I'm not ashamed to, HUD.gov, find rental assistance, figure out how to become a first-time homeowner, you, your child, your sister, your cousin, so we can have this self-reliance that we're talking about. But stay informed and spread the word.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, your thoughts?
Well, first I would encourage folks to do what the secretary said. Buy a house, buy your own home. 30% of your net worth is in your home. The second thing I would encourage folks to do is to join one organization that owns something and help them to structure some strategy to activate that to maybe to feed the community, maybe to clothe the naked, but somewhere we should activate our resources to make our communities better and join one thing in your community. That's what I would say.
Well, and I would say that at Feeding America, we often talk about food, funds, and friends. And we need all three. And your capacity to provide one or the other might change over time, but we are asset-filled people. And we should find a path toward a true understanding and acknowledgement of just how powerful we actually are, harness that power, and make certain that we activate inside of that power. So go to feedingamerica.org and you'll learn all about the work that we do. And I guarantee you, we're serving your community. So wherever you live, anywhere in the United States and Puerto Rico, there's someone in the network that I'm so privileged to serve alongside, who's standing side by side with your neighbors. So you go stand out there with them too.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. And as you heard, there's something to do no matter where you are. So I'll ask that you join me in thanking our panelists. We hope you enjoy the festivities. Welcome to New Orleans, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.